recorded now. All right. Okay, so once you guys have, VirtualBox downloaded, you can go ahead and launch it. So I'll just go ahead and launch it from here. And the setup is going to look something like this. All right, let me change the screen share so you guys see the actual window. All right, can you guys hear me? Okay. So yeah, that might happen with the VirtualBox install is when I click the next button, it just kicked me out. All right. So just keep that in mind. If you do get kicked out, just join in again. We'll be here. All right. Don't worry about it. Okay. Can you guys see that window? Welcome to VirtualBox. All right. Okay. So you can go ahead and click next. It's going to ask you just keep everything default. We don't need to change anything. All right. Just click next. Then it's going to say, hey, if you do install it, it's going to reset your network interface. That's okay. And that's the reason it might kick you out of the meeting or just come back. All right, as I said. We'll go ahead and click yes. It's going to say if you have any dependencies that are remaining. I saw that some of you guys had issues with not having the 2019 redistributable, right? VirtualBox can install that for you. All right, just keep that in mind. This is for installing all the different dependencies there are. We'll just go ahead and click yes. And then once you hit install, it's going to start that installation, and that might reset your network and kick you out of the meeting. All right. So I'm just going to hit cancel here, but go ahead and install it and then come back. All right. So I'll give you guys 10 minutes to install it and then come back. Let me know if you have any questions. All right. So Jeffrey, since you're having issue, and other people could have similar issue where they're not able to launch the installation because of the missing package, what you can do is go to Google again and just search for the 2019 redistributable from Microsoft, and you can go ahead and download from Microsoft itself. You can see there's, let me see if I can send you a link directly. So just right here, if you click the download center from the search page, just hit that download center and that's going to take you to the page and download the package for you. Just launch this package and make sure everything's default. All you have to do is just hit next, 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 and it's going to install it. You don't have to make any changes. All right, 4 more minutes, and then I'll continue with the workshop. And that's okay if you don't get the chance to install VirtualBox 2. You can follow along with me and then do it later with the recording if it's available. I'll try to see if I can make it available for you guys. This is something that's great. It's freely available out there, and it should be easy for you guys to do it yourself. At least with the recording, it should be a lot helpful. And definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, and if you have any questions about it, definitely shoot me a question. I will, try to answer it as fast as I can. Any questions while we are waiting? Anybody have any questions? Feel free to post it in the chat, or just unmute yourself and ask. If you're using a Mac, Carl, the only way that it's going to work is if you don't have the M1 or the M2 Mac. If you have the Intel Mac, only then it's going to work. So if you have the Intel Mac, you're fine. So you don't really need all of 256. That's just given as a requirement because, again, for similar reasons that you have, Stu, since you were upgrading Windows 11, you have 70 gigs left. That's fine too. We were just keeping the T256 gig as a requirement so that everybody has enough hard drive space. So 70 gigs is still fine. It's just that we need a minimum hard drive on your system of 256. Yep. All right, 1 more minute. Any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? Okay. All right. So let's continue on. If you have VirtualBox installed already, right, you can start configuring, right? So we'll go ahead and start our configuration. So I'm going to go ahead and open up VirtualBox. Let me know if you don't see it. You guys see VirtualBox? Everyone sees VirtualBox, okay? Okay. All right. So this is what VirtualBox looks like when it first launches. All right. We have the VirtualBox manager here. And we have preferences, import, export, new, add, different ways, right? Preferences are there to do some specific configuration. If you want to change how your VMs interact with VirtualBox, if you want to change certain things like how your VirtualBox looks or how much memory you can use, things like that. All right. So what we are going to do here first, after you have VirtualBox installed, is I'm going to configure a network, right? Now, why are we configuring that network? It's because we want our Hacklab to be separate from our internal network, right? We don't want things that we do in our Hacklab to have an effect on our network that we are on right now, right? So VirtualBox gives us an easy way to separate those things out, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to go to network. All right, so if you hit that button there, it's going to pop up this menu, and then you can pick network. Now, what we're going to do under network is go to something called NAT networks, right? This box right here. And that's going to change your view, just a little bit, all right? Host-only networks and NAT network. You see that difference? Yeah. Under the NAT network, we are going to create a new network. All right. Make sure that you guys are under NAT network. All right. Do not create another one here or another one here. All right. Just right here. You can just call it NAT network, or if you want, we can change the name. Right. All we have to do is go down here and maybe change it to something like vulnerable. Right. Because that's all vulnerable network. Or actually, let me change it to Hacklab, right? Because that's what we're doing. So it's going to be a Hacklab environment. Now, this part is really important, the IPv4 prefix. All right. Before deciding what should be the IPv4 prefix for this network, I want you guys to go to command prompt on your system. All right. All you have to do is go to the search bar, type in CMD for command prompt. All right. And you have this window that's going to open up. All right, for command prompt. Once you get to command prompt, I want you guys to type ipconfig. And that's going to give you an overview of your local IP address. All right, not your global IP address, your local IP address, your IP address for your system within your network. All right, behind your firewall, behind your router. All right. So here you can see that I'm on a 192.168 prefix scheme. All right. Everybody sees that? The 192.168? All right. I want you guys to find out what your network prefix is. Right? By typing in ipconfig, it's going to tell you what your network prefix is. Right? It is important that the prefix of your network and the prefix for the NAT network be completely different. All right, we don't want them to be in the same prefix. All right, because that can cause issues with your virtual machines and issues with your home network as well. All right, I've had issues where because of me configuring a NAT network with the same prefix, traffic can sometimes cross over. Right. Okay, so now that we know what my prefix is 192.168, and the prefix by default in VirtualBox is set to 10.0.20. It might be too small for you guys to see there on the screen, but it's 10.0.20. 10.0.2.0/24. That's what it says on my screen there, right? So I'm going to leave it there. What command should you put? It's ipconfig, right? And these are just query commands. This is not going to change anything about your system. ipconfig is only going to tell you what the IP address of your system is. The local IP, keep that in mind, right? So once you have that done, you can set your 10.0.20/24, completely different. And also make sure that this is checked, the enable DHCP. Anybody know what DHCP is? Just your best guess what it might be, what it's used for. Yeah, you guys are right, right? Dynamic IP addressing dishes out IP addresses. DHCP, or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, what it does is it's a database of sorts, and that database tracks the IP addresses that are given out to each of your devices, right? And whenever your device wants to connect to the network, it reaches out to the DHCP server and performs the DORA process, right? I know Dora the Explorer, it's the same name, but it performs the DORA process to get the new IP address. And that's how it basically communicates in your network, right? How do we get to that screen on VirtualBox? Okay, so go to these boxes right here. When you click that, it's going to show up this small menu and go to network, right? Okay. So now we have our settings, okay, where we want to be. We're not going to make any other changes, and we're just going to click apply. Okay, changes have been applied, right? And you will see them reflect right here. Hacklab and whatever IPv4 prefix you have picked, I picked 10.0.20, right? And DHCP server is enabled. So we're placing the number in the default gateway and place it in the, no, so they have to be different, not the same, different numbers. All right, completely different. If your default gateway says 192.168, make sure this is 10.0.20. All right, if your home network says 10 something something, make this 192.168. All right. Okay, so now we have our network set up, right? We still don't have our virtual machines. We are going to create our virtual machines in just a bit here. All right. Before we go ahead and create our machines, I want to talk more about what VirtualBox is and how it works, right? I want you guys to understand the interaction of how VirtualBox is getting all those resources, right? So for that, I'm going to do some annotation here. All right. So VirtualBox, what it does is it takes a look at all of our system's hardware, right? It says, okay, you have, so much RAM, maybe like 8 gigs of RAM. You have a processor, right? A 64-bit processor. Multiple cores. You guys probably have something that has 4 or more cores, right? And then you have a hard drive. Are you guys not seeing the annotations that I'm typing? Nobody seeing those annotations? Um, okay. I'm not typing. I am writing something on the screen there. How about now? Blank screen. Okay, that's fine. I'll just use a different method. That's okay. You guys can see my screen? Everyone can see my screen right now? Okay, all right. So VirtualBox, what it does is whenever you install it and you start to run it, it takes a look at all of your system's resources, right? Let's take a look at what resources my system has, right? So I'm going to open up Task Manager, and you don't have to do that. All right, we can go ahead and open up Task Manager. And the task manager shows us all the different things that are running and how much, memory, disk, network each of those things are using. And I'm going to go to performance. The reason I'm going to go to performance is it gives me an overview of what kind of resources my system has, right? So if you have CPU, right, as you can see, it has, so much speed that it's running. But what I want you guys to do is focus right here, right? Base speed, 3 gigs. Then you have sockets and cores, right? 8 cores, logical processor, 16. VirtualBox takes this information and stores it, right? Same with the memory, right? It says 7.9 gigs available right now, but my system overall has 16 gigs. All right, so I can use 16 gigs from that. Same with the SSD, right? Storage. VirtualBox takes this info, and when I create a new machine, asks me, okay, how do you want to go about and create it? What kind of resources do you want to allot to this machine? Right? So let's go ahead and create that and see those questions. So we'll go ahead and go to the welcome page, right? All I did was click this icon again and went to welcome. Then we're going to create a new machine, right? That is going to pop up this window right here, and it's going to ask you certain things, right? What type of machine it's going to be: Windows, Linux, Mac, FreeBSD, whatever, right? Whatever OS you want to use. At one point, VirtualBox did not support so many different OSs. It only supported like Windows or Linux, right? But now it supports a whole range of OSs. All right. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to call it vulnerable. All right. This is going to be the machine where we run Ubuntu. All right. Again, Jude, I just clicked on this box right here and went to the welcome page. And then from there, I clicked on new. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm just gonna call it vulnerable, and it's gonna go to my default folder. Keep track of this folder. Where is this VM going to be created in? All right, so just keep track of this folder. We are going to use that later. Next is going to be the ISO image. ISO image is what is used to install ROSs. Right now, I had posted the link to download the Ubuntu ISO. Right, so I'm hoping everybody started that because that's what we're going to use to create our virtual machine. Everyone's good on that? If not, I can send the link out again. Okay, send the link out again then. So here are the links that I sent out. So go to the link that says Ubuntu, and it's going to go take you to this page right here. And all we're going to do is download the ISO image right here, right? Download Ubuntu Server 2204. And one click is going to start your download. You can see it started downloading. Now, I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to download it again, right? That's where we're going to use this image, right? But not right now. You don't have to populate that right now. Make sure to start that download and let it go, right? Next is the type, right? It's asking us what's the type of this virtual machine. Well, the type is going to be Linux. You see this drop down? You have Microsoft Windows, Linux, Solaris, BSD, IBM, macOS, other. Right? So what we're going to do is stick with Linux because Ubuntu is a Linux machine, right? Now it's asking us what type of Linux it is, right? Or what version of Linux. If you hit that drop down, it's going to give you all these different options. I want you guys to scroll and look for Ubuntu right here. Specifically the Ubuntu 2204 Jammy Jellyfish, right? Once you have this selected, everything's good. We don't need to pick anything else. We can go ahead and hit next. All right, this is where that, hardware virtualization comes into play. This is where virtualization truly shows what it's capable of, right? It's asking us, hey, what kind of memory do you want to allot it? And what kind of, processors, how many processors do you want to allot to it, right? As you can see, even though my system can support giving all 16 gigs to VirtualBox, right? It only tells me that, hey, if you pick up to 11 gigs, you'll be fine. But anything after that is the red zone, right? Why is that the red zone? I have 16 gigs available, so why not do all 16 gigs? Because your host, right, the Windows system that's running behind VirtualBox still needs memory, right? If you give all 16 gigs to a virtual machine, you're basically starving your host of memory. And that's where, that resource starvation comes into play, right? You have to allocate the right kind of memory, the specific amount, so it's not gonna make your system struggle, right? For this lab, we're fine with 2 gigs. All right, we don't need more than 2 gigs of memory for our Ubuntu machine. If you give it more than 2 gigs, it's better, but only do that if you have a machine that's more than 8 gigs of RAM. All right, if you're just working with the base minimum that we had for this workshop, do not give it more than 2 gigs. You'll start seeing, struggling issues with your system because we're going to be running 2 VMs, all right, not just one. So keep that in mind. 2 gigs for this VM, 2 gigs for our Kali, right? Here I have 16 gigs available. I'm still going to give it 2 gigs, right? Just because we can, stick with the uh, settings of the workshop, right? So just change that, change to 2048, which is 2 gigs, right? So you can see it automatically put the slider. Next is processors. You can see I have up to 16 CPUs available. Now, what does that mean? That does not mean I have 16 CPUs on my system, right? It goes back to the task manager where it tells you that I have 16 logical processors, also known as threads, right? This is basically how many tasks you can throw towards a processor at the same time, right? So my processor can take up to 16 tasks at the same time, right? So I'm not going to give it all 16 because, again, we need some of it for our host, right? VirtualBox says keep at least 50% for your host. As you can see, right here, we have 16, like it's all red after 8. right? So we don't want to give it 8. We can just give it 2. You don't have to give it all 8. If you don't have 16 like I do, if you have something 8 or less, just give it 1 or 2. You don't have to give it more than that. Having 2 is always beneficial for the Ubuntu machines, Kali machines. 1 kind of restricts it like a lot. So I would say increase it to at least 2. Right. Then we'll hit next. Now it's asking us hard drive. Right? As I said, it takes resources from your system, right? So next is the hard drive resource. Now, how much hard drive do you want to create? Well, in VirtualBox, in hypervisors, in the virtual machine world, there's actually 2 ways of deploying hard drive space for your, virtual machines or VMs. The first way is the dynamically allocated, right? Or something that keeps changing, something that is not, static, right? 2 ways, so dynamic or static. So the first one, dynamically allocated, is where if you tell it that, hey, take 25 gigs for the Ubuntu machine, it's not going to take 25 gigs out of your hard drive and put it aside. No, right? With dynamically allocated, what it's going to do is it's going to let VirtualBox take the space as it's needed, right? So if you install Ubuntu and it only takes like 6 gigs, then it's only going to take 6 gigs on your system. It's not going to take the entire 25 that we have assigned to it, right? Now that's the dynamic allocated function. If you do static, right, then it's going to assign everything at once. So if you say give 25 gigs to the Ubuntu machine, it's going to give all 25 gigs to the Ubuntu machine. So you will see that space being occupied in your C drive, right? So here, I'm just going to give it 25 gigs, and you can see I'm not going to check the pre-allocate full size. That's what that static option is. They just changed the name of it, but that's what it does. It assigns everything at once. We don't want to do that. All right. You can also have the option of using an existing one, but we're not going to do that. And you also have the option of adding one later, right? So once we create the Kali machine, we'll use this option right here, but that's later. For now, create virtual hard disk and make sure it's 25 gigs and next. Then it gives you a brief summary of everything, right? You can see virtual machine name, vulnerable. Look at that location. Keep that location in mind, right? Specifically that first part, users, my user, and then the VirtualBox VMs. All right, keep that folder in check. You don't need that vulnerable folder specifically. That's where this machine is going, but we need that location for the Kali VM later, right? Then we have our guest OS type. Make sure it's set to the Ubuntu 2204 Jammy Jellyfish. All right, 64-bit. Memory 2048, processors 2, and our disk size 25, and it's not going to be allocated completely. All right, and then we're going to hit finish. It's going to go through the process and set up your virtual machine. All right, now this process might take some time for you depending on your system. It might take some time. For me, it was quick. Any questions so far? Everyone's following along. I know it's a lot. Okay, all right, great. So how about we go ahead and start with the installation, right? We can go ahead and start with the Ubuntu installation, given the fact that everybody has the uh, the 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 Ubuntu ISO. Everybody got that downloaded. Okay, right. So The Ubuntu ISO, once you have that downloaded, and once you have this machine created, that's okay, Stu. That's okay. That's fine. Just follow along later, I would say. As I said, I will talk to Yasmin about making this recording available so you guys can follow along. All right. So now we have our vulnerable machine. Let's go ahead and boot it. To boot it, all we have to do is select the machine and hit start. So we'll hit start. You can see it's powering up. And a window like this is going to pop up. And now it's asking you for that ISO. It's saying, hey, there's nothing bootable on this system. We need to boot it. So how do we boot it? So it's asking us, hey, if you have a DVD or an ISO image, give it to me and I'll boot it up. Okay, so we'll go ahead and select it. If you hit that drop down, you'll see these options right here, and you have to hit other right here, and then we can go to where our ISO is. Right now, my ISO is on the desktop in a folder called Workshop Files. All right, your ISO is likely in your download folder, right? It's mostly in your download folder because that's where you downloaded, right? My ISO is in the desktop in a folder called Workshop Files. That's fine, right? It's not going to matter that much where the ISO is. Just go towards it, hit open, and then we're going to hit mount and retry boot. Right, that's what that option is. So it's going to mount the ISO, and there we go. It booted into the Ubuntu ISO. All right, now if you click inside it, it's going to tell you that, hey, you have clicked inside the mouse. Do you want to capture it? Yes. All right. So you can see you have multiple different options once you boot Ubuntu. And I'm actually going to change the view here. And you don't have to change this view. It's just so that you guys can see this better. All right, is that much better? At least to view it? Yeah. Okay. You can only do this once the machine is actually booted. I couldn't do it with the other windows, unfortunately. Yeah. All right, so here you can see that the ISO has booted up, and what we're in right now is called GRUB, or the Grand Unified Bootloader. This allows us to pick the OS that we want to boot into, right, or dual boot. If you guys are Mac users out there, you have probably heard of something called Boot Camp, which give you the ability of booting either into Mac OS or Windows, right? This is something similar. If you have a Linux machine installed alongside your Windows machine, Grub gives you the ability to either boot into Windows or boot into Linux, whatever you want, right? So here with the ISO, Grub is giving us the ability to either just test Ubuntu server or actually install it, right? And then there's other options as well, like test memory or boot the Ubuntu server with a specific hardware kernel, right? Or the hardware encryption kernel, right? We don't really want that. We're just going to stick with the default option of try or install Ubuntu server. So I'm going to hit enter. And you can't use the mouse anymore, all right? Once you're in Ubuntu, once you're in Linux, you're in no mouse world, right? So put these aside, all right? You can't use them anymore. I know it's a challenge, right? Using Linux, especially if you haven't had exposure, then it's a challenge. Yep. So that's the page that we're on, Justin, now. It just took a second for mine to boot up. You probably gave it more resources than mine. That's why I booted up faster, right? All right, so here, language, English. I'm just going to stick with default. If you guys want a different language, you can. All right. So I'm just going to stick with English. Now here, I'm going to stick with continue without updating. Updates are not going to matter for what we're doing with this hack lab. All right, so it's okay if we are using an older version of the installer. We don't have to have the latest version of the installer. All right, so we're just going to hit enter again to continue without updating. All right, next is pick your keyboard layout. I'm going to stick with English, just the defaults, and then hit enter for done. Okay. Now it's asking us choose the type of install, right? Leaving it default. We're not making any changes. All right. I don't want I don't want you guys to, have any issues with this install. We are sticking to defaults. We're not making any changes. All right. So hit next for done. And then it's going to ask you the network information. Right. Now this is where we make certain changes. Right? This is the part where we change things out because we do want this machine to be on the other network, which is the NAT network, right? So how do I do that? Well, on your machine, it probably looks like this, right? Not like how I had it in scaled mode. It just looks like this. I want you guys to go to machine and settings, right? Once you get to machine and settings, this is the window that's going to pop up, right? This tells you an overview of your machine and what are the things that have been configured for it. I want you guys to go to network, and right now you'll see that it's attached to NAT. I know it's a bit confusing, right? But that NAT network that we set up is not this NAT network. They're different. All right. So what we're going to do is change the network that it's attached to. So this one is attached to NAT, and we're going to change it to NAT network. And you can see as soon as I change it to NAT network, it automatically populates Hacklab because that's the only NAT network that we have. We don't have anything else, right? We just have Hacklab. And that's the network that we want to be in. Then we can hit OK. And that's it. And you can see it bounces the network card or the network information, reaches out to DHCP and gets a new address, which is the 10.02.15/24 in that network that we created earlier. Right? I'm going to change the view back again. All right. Now that we have changed our network, we can go ahead and hit done. Now it's asking us for a proxy address. Sometimes, some companies or some, workplaces, homes, depending on how their, internet connection is set up, they might be going through a proxy of sorts. All right, so that's what it's asking us here. Now, what is a proxy and how it works? I would say that is a, different day, different class, right? Not for today. But we're not going to change the proxy address. We changed it to Hacklab, Danny. It's just changed to Hacklab. All right, so I'm going to hit done. Leave this default. We're not going to make any changes here. Just hit done. Now it's asking us for the storage information, right? How do we want to configure our storage? Right, we want to use the entire disk, and we do want to set up a disk as LVM group. We're not going to make any changes. Leave everything default. All right, we're just sticking with a default installation here. Again, this just tells you how your storage is going to be configured. Don't worry about it if you don't understand what's on this screen. That's not important for this workshop, right? What is important is that how do we use this machine later, right? How we use this to set up our hack lab. And the defaults that we are creating here, it's enough for the hack lab. All right. We don't need more than this. We don't need to assign any more resources to this. So we're just going to hit done again, keeping everything default. It's going to ask us, do you confirm? Because this is going to wipe the virtual hard drive that you have assigned. We don't have any, we don't have any information on that virtual hard drive that was created, right? So that's fine. Are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I do want to continue. Now it's asking us for a profile setup, right? Setting up our profile for the system. I'm just going to call it vulnerable, right? That's going to be the username for this system. Next, it's asking us for the server name. If you are wondering how I got to the next line, I just used tab as my key, all right, to go to the next line. Server name, I'm just going to call it Hacklab. Pick a username, vulnerable, and then choose a password. Just keep something super simple. You don't have to make anything complex. Doesn't have to be a complicated password. We're not sharing this VM out to the world. It can be unsecure. It's okay, right? So welcome one. That's the password that I'm going with, right? So the username I'm going with is vulnerable, and the password that I'm going with is welcome one. You're, you're welcome to use the same things if you want. If not, you can pick your own name and your password. All right. Okay, so once that is configured, all you have to do is hit tab again. You will see done highlighted there in green and hit enter. All right. Now this is something new that they started at Ubuntu is their pro service, right? That's a paid service that you have to sign up for. We're not doing that, so we're just going to keep it default, skip for now. We're not going to make any changes to that. So hit continue. It's asking us for OpenSSH. We're not doing that. Just scroll down to done. Not making any changes here. Everything default, right? Hit done, and that's it. It's starting the installation, right? Anyone have any questions? Let me know if I'm going too fast. I have a tendency to go fast. All right, caught up. Great. Everyone else? Okay. All right, so while this is installing, right, we can let this run in the background. It's going to take some time to do the install. We'll go back to our presentation. All right. And we'll talk about why did we go through this entire route of, VirtualBox and setting up Ubuntu and having, this procedure set up in this way. It's because we are leveraging a new, relatively new virtualization technology called containers, right? Containers are a new type of, I would say like tiny virtual machines. The reason being is because they are software specific. All right. With our hack lab, what we're going to do is we are going to set up specific vulnerable machines, right? Now, we don't want to create a new virtual machine for each of those vulnerable machines, right? That's wastage of resources, wastage of time. We don't really have that big of a hard drive space. We want something that's portable, that's something, lightweight, something that we can use, right, every day for just practicing, testing our skills, right? So containers give us a way of just deploying specific software, right, that gives us access to vulnerable applications that we can test on with our Kali system, right? They're much faster than VMs. They are much lighter. Your average VM is about 4 gigs in size, right? Containers are 150 megs on average in size. All right, so you can see that difference. With VMs, you have to deploy a new VM for every new application that you want to use. For containers, you can just have one VM and run multiple containers on. All right, and each of those containers are isolated from their workloads. All right, so they are much smaller, much faster, much more efficient. They use resources a lot easily. Let's say, right? So that's why we're installing Ubuntu. Ubuntu is going to be the host where we run our vulnerable containers, right? Our containers that we're going to test on. Okay, so if we go back to our VirtualBox, let's see. So it's still doing the install. It's going to take some time. You can do a cancel update and reboot, but it takes about the same time. If you do a cancel update and reboot, or if you just do an update and reboot, it takes about the same time. All right. Any questions? Anybody have any questions while we are waiting for Ubuntu to install? No questions? Everyone's good? Yes, Stu, you're right. So Kali is zipped with 7-zip. So having 7-zip is, going to be needed for them to open up the Kali VM. Right. So make sure that you have 7-zip installed, or if you're on a Mac, you have unarchiver installed. It's going to be 2204. If you just joined a few minutes back, we went through the entire installation of VirtualBox, and we went through the procedure of creating Ubuntu and installing it as a virtual machine in VirtualBox. Okay. So right now, that's the process that we are waiting on to complete. Any other questions? Anybody have any other questions? So So that's the version of Ubuntu that we're using. I just posted it into chat. It's 2204 LTS, or long-term release. It's basically something that they support for a long time. For virtual hard disk space, just pick 25 gigs. You don't need to change it. Default. For recordings, we will send out an email of whether the recording is going to be available or not. I don't have the answer right now if the recording is available later or not for now. Okay. All right. So as you can see, the Ubuntu install is complete, and it just says reboot now. So the update is done. And now we can go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to reboot the machine. And that's okay. If it says failed a couple of times, it's okay. No need to be alarmed about it. Okay, just basically it's trying to eject the ISO. It didn't work, so it's just waiting for our input. So just hit enter, and that's it. It did the reboot. Yes, Pierre, just hit start. All right, the boot up is complete. How do you know the boot up is complete? Well, you'll see that there's no more prompts being sent out towards you. Plus, if you hit enter, it's just asking you to log in. Do you see that? I'm just hitting enter. It's not going to do anything to the machine. You can just keep hitting enter, right? Linux is completely CLI based. You can put a GUI on top of it or a graphical user interface on top of it, but for this lab, we don't really need that. We're fine with just having the non-GUI version. Yes, Pierre, you're right. All right, so here, let's log in with that username and password that we created earlier. Vulnerable, and the password was just welcome1. You might not see the, asterisk signs, or you might not see those stars that your password shows you typically, is because in Linux, they try to prevent something called shoulder surfing. Right now, by the number of stars that are displayed in your password, one can identify how many characters are in your password. So Linux does not want that capability to be there, right? So we'll just enter our password and hit enter. And if your password is correct, you'll see this welcome page. All right, it says welcome to Ubuntu 2204 LTS. And then, it gives you more information, such as if there are any updates that can be applied, how much memory, storage you're using, etc. Right? It just gives you that information. Right? Everyone's following so far? Any questions? Here, if it says failed to boot, probably happening something with the ISO. You might want to, if you want, you can share your screen and I can, see what's going on with the ISO. But you should be able to like browse to the ISO and then hit, mount and reboot. Make sure that you pick the right version of Ubuntu. All right, yeah, so hit that drop down that says not selected. Hit other, and then point it towards your ISO, wherever the ISO is. That does not look right because the Ubuntu ISO is at least 1.28 gigs, not 124 megs. So I think that's where the issue is. Go back to the Ubuntu page. To the Ubuntu, website. Yes, Karen, I'm not using the GUI for this. We don't have to use the GUI at all. So there's no terminal. This is the terminal, right? So, yep, go to that thanks for downloading page, and I'm not seeing it. Maybe. Yeah, so it is still downloading. It's still downloading, Pierre, so it's going to take some time. Okay, but use that file. Once that is done, that's what you need to use. Okay. Does that answer your question, Pierre? Okay. All right. So now that we have our system logged in, everything is good to go. We can even do like a clear screen here. And this is what basically Linux is. So if you guys ever wondered what Linux looks like, how do people interact with it, this is what Linux is. Okay, there's no GUI, nothing at the core of Linux, right? I know it's a little bit overwhelming because you're like, what am I supposed to do with this, right? Is there anything that I can do, right? There's a lot that you can do with it actually, all right? Now, if you're at this part, all right, that means you successfully install Ubuntu, everything's good to go. Before we move any further though, okay, we're going to use another feature of VirtualBox and of any other hypervisor out there. All right, virtual machines give us this capability. It's called snapshots, right? A snapshot is just a, quick copy of that virtual machine at that point in time. All right, so if I go to machine, take snapshot, give it a name, something like clean install, because this is our clean installed Ubuntu machine. We'll go ahead and hit OK. It's going to take a quick copy of the hard drive of the machine and the memory. So it saves it. Okay. Kind of like putting the machine in a hibernation state, but taking a copy of it. Okay. So something similar to that. All right. So snapshot just gives us the ability that in case something breaks with our machine here, right, we can just go back to that earlier point in time without having to reinstall our entire machine, right? It's like having a backup of sorts. Okay. So the reason I'm doing this is because if something happens with our hack lab, right? Or if you're practicing with the hack lab and you accidentally break something, right? Maybe accidentally delete the admin user, right? That is possible in Linux, right? So if you accidentally delete it, then you can just go back to the earlier point in time, and there you go, everything's fixed, right? Okay, so now that we have our snapshot, we have our, basic machine set up, right? Now we can go ahead and install Docker, right? And we can start using the machine to its full capabilities, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to change the view again to put it in scaled mode, right? Now we're going to install certain prerequisites before installing Docker, right? Now the command for that is this. I'm putting it in the chat. You guys can follow along, right? So first, we're going to do something called a sudo apt update, right? Now, what does that do? A sudo apt update runs a sort of Windows update on this machine, all right? Which is Linux update, but kind of like Windows update, right? What it's doing is that it's going out to its repositories, wherever it downloads all of its packages from, and it looks at, okay, what's new? What has been updated since I installed this machine, right? So if I hit enter here, it's going to ask me for the password because we are running the command with admin privileges, right? In Linux world, the admin user is referred to as the root user. All right. So because I'm running this command as the root user, I need to enter my password again, right? It's like right-clicking some program in Windows and running with admin privileges, all right? So let's give it the password, welcome one. And there we go. So it's contacting Ubuntu and it's trying to understand, okay, what can be upgraded on this machine. It's not going to run the upgrade. It's just looking for what's new out there. So in case we do decide to upgrade something, it gets the latest package, right? Not something that is maybe a version older or two versions older, right? So here we're going to type sudo apt, right? Apt is the package manager for Ubuntu. All right, I'm not going to dive too much into Linux itself. That's again another entire class, but that you can take at Skillspire, right? But here we're just going to dive into basic commands, right? apt is the package manager, kind of like we have, Windows' package manager or Explorer, as we call it, right? That's used to install, uninstall things like that. apt is going to give us the ability to install something, and what we're installing is something called Build Essential, right? Build Essential is a package that contains certain dependencies, certain packages, kind of like you had to download that redistributable, right, to install VirtualBox. Build Essential contains packages that can be used to install things on Ubuntu. All right, so we need these to install Docker correctly. All right, so that's why we are installing Build Essential. And we also need Linux headers, right? Linux headers help the system identify what type of system are we in, right? Yes, we are in an Ubuntu, but what's the version of Ubuntu? So Linux headers helps programs that we install identify the OS correctly, identify the kernel or, the hardware layer, everything correctly so that everything, works well, all right? So we are going to install both of these things, and the -y at the end basically says yes. Okay, so accept the changes that this command is going to make to my system. All right, so I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see a bunch of things happening there that basically tells us that our command worked, right? Everyone following so far? Any questions? Okay, so far so good. All right, so whatever we wanted to install, right, the prerequisites to installing our containers, right? Now, how do we get our containers onto this machine? To run our containers, you need some kind of an environment. Just like to run virtual machines, we need VirtualBox, right? So to run containers, there's a couple of different options. First, there's Docker, and you have Kubernetes. Okay, for this lab, for even other hack labs that you might come across out there, they're likely going to use Docker. All right. The reason being there's a huge community out there. Everything's open source. You can easily go and download a container from Docker's website. Okay. So what we're going to do is install Docker on top of it. So how do we install Docker? The same command that I posted earlier, just not putting build essential or Linux headers. We're just going to put Docker in there. And I'm going to give you the command for it as well. So that's the command to install Docker, right? So sudo apt install docker.io -y. Again, the -y for yes, I accept changes to the system, right? So we'll go ahead and hit enter. So I will answer that later, Samuel. I'm still waiting on a confirmation of the recording is going to be available or not. It is likely it is going to be available. I'm going to try and get this to be available so that you guys can follow this and do it again if you wanted to yourself, right? But right now, I have no word on whether it's going to be available or not. Yeah. But it is being recorded. All right. It is being recorded right now. Okay. So Docker has been installed. Next is adding our user to the Docker group so that we don't have to keep typing sudo again and again, right? We've been typing sudo again and again because every command we have had to escalate. So what we're going to do is uh, make sure that we don't have to keep typing sudo if we just want to interact with Docker. All right. Okay, so we just have confirmation, right? Ulrich here mentioned that we will be sending the recording out. And it should be available on SkillSpire YouTube channel in a few days as well. So it's great. Thank you. All right, so what we'll do is just run sudo and something called user mod. All right, user mod or user modification, right? What we're doing is we are just changing the values for our user, which is called vulnerable, right? What we're doing is we are adding the user to group Docker, and the user is vulnerable, right? That's how this command is laid out. Sudo or the root user mod or user modify and add this user, which is vulnerable, to the group Docker. That's how this command works, right? And I will send this command out as well. Again, all this is to make sure we don't have to keep typing sudo when we are creating our hack lab and using containers, right? We hit enter, and that's it. The user has been added. Next, we want to make sure that Docker comes back up once we reboot our system, right? So to do that, we just need two more commands, and I will send you guys those commands as well. Here are those two commands. So sudo systemctl or system control center, right? Start Docker. That starts that Docker service. And then sudo systemctl enable Docker, which basically adds Docker to the list of programs that boot when the system boots up, right? When this VM boots up, it uses Docker as its, one of its starting services as well. All right, we hit enter, and that's it. All right, our Docker process is complete. We have Docker available now. We can use it. What I do recommend after you have completed this process is you do a quick reboot so that, everything is set, right? Even though Linux doesn't really require reboots, they are recommended every once in a while to ensure that all permissions applications, they get, identified. How would I confirm if Docker is, good or not. So we'll do that after our reboot. All right. So once we do the reboot, so sudo reboot now, that's going to reboot your system, as you can see. I'll put that command in the chat as well. All right, and our system's back online. All right, we can do a quick enter. And log back in. Password, welcome one. There we go. We're back in our environment. I'm just going to do a couple of enters to separate it from those messages above. And all we have to do is do a sudo systemctl, which is that system control command, status. Instead of using start or enable, we'll just do status and the service name, which is Docker. Right? You can hit enter. It's asking us the password because we are trying to run the command as sudo or admin privileges, right? So we'll just type in welcome one. Oh, typed in the wrong password there, and there we go, right? So that's sudo systemctl status docker. Okay, and you can see it tells you exactly that the service is running, it's active, everything is green there. All right. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? All good? All right. Now, if you are in this prompt and you're kind of stuck, you're wondering how do I get out of it? If you try pressing enter, nothing works, right? So what you have to do is press Q, all right? Q for quit. And you can see as soon as I press Q, it gets me out of that prompt and I'm back into my command line, right? So this completes our basic setup. Right? Now you can use this machine to run as many containers as you want. And as a recommendation, I will tell you guys that you should try to take a snapshot here as well, right? I'm going to actually do that. Go to machine, take snapshot, and just give it something that you can reference, right? Something like maybe after Docker install, right? Something that just tells you, okay, this was the point in time that I took this snapshot. Now, don't keep taking snapshots. I would say for a virtual machine running on this kind of hardware, where I'm running with my laptop or desktop, uh, I would not take more than 3 snapshots for a system, right? Maximum 5. If for some reason you wanted 5 snapshots, right? Snapshots are not backups. All right, keep that in mind. People do tend to confuse them with it. Snapshots are not backups. They're just there till you finish your work. That's it. All right. Once you are sure your system is where you want it to be, you should delete the older snapshots. The reason being, it does affect performance of your VM. Right? Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay. Anybody needs a break? I'm thinking you guys do, right? After all this content, looking through, Linux, maybe getting introduced to it for the first time. I'm sure you guys definitely need a break. I know I did when I first started learning this stuff. After half an hour of being exposed to Linux, I was just like, I need a break. All right. All right. So going back to the agenda that we had, right? We we said we would break from 3 p.m. to 3:20. So it is almost that time, right? We'll just do an extra 10 minutes, just like a half an hour break. If you guys are hungry, grab a quick snack, definitely, but take that time, right? Take this, 20, 30 minutes off. All right. And then we'll come back and dive into Cali and the actual hack lab. This was just the, setup for that hack lab, right? Okay, so let's take a break till 3:20. Sounds good for everyone? You can let me know with a quick thumbs up or a yes. Okay. Now, do take this time if you are lagging behind in the lab to just catch up. These 30 minutes can be used for that. Okay. So definitely take that or just reach out to me if you guys have any questions. All right. So let's come back in you know 30 minutes at 3:20. Now, what I like to do in my breaks usually is I do a sort of duck race. I don't know if you guys have seen that before. Just some fun timers, just so you guys have something to look at for the next 20 minutes. Let's see. All right. So it's 4:52. So I'm just gonna do 28 minutes. All right, and let's see, can I do the full screen here? All right. I'll see you guys in 28 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Shwetank. Can everyone hear me? I see some ducks floating around, and they look very cute. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So I'll take this time to do a quick presentation of SkillSpire. If you've attended our webinars before, I'm sure you've heard this. Um, you can just mute me. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of new people that keep joining. And so we'd love to give them a little bit more background about SkillSpire. Hi, I'm Yasmin Ali. Hi, Shwetang. How's the workshop going so far?
Good, good. Yeah, I think it's going great. Uh, I think people are kind of tired too with all the Linux that I've thrown at them, though.
Well, this is just a teaser from, SK as he goes by. If you're interested, I can tell you about the boot camp that's actually starting on May 16th. But before that, I wanted to share a little bit about who we are. I know that we've been doing a lot of presentations, workshops lately in various topics, and we'll continue to do this. And I hope you're finding it useful. We're trying to be as coming up with applications and coming up with topics that are interesting, as well as, learn something from it. So if you do like our presentations, do send us an email and let us know if there's any particular topic that you would like to learn, do let us know about that as well. We're always open to feedback. So I'm going to share my screen and uh, just tell me if, okay. Okay. So can everyone see my screen here? Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we are Skillspire, a social impact coding bootcamp since 2016. We're based in Bellevue, Washington State, and we've been doing a lot of training and different courses since 2016. Um, One of the things that I always ask people, what do you aspire for? What are you looking to get out of, when you transition to a new career? What are some of the, you know, um, challenges that you come through? So those are some things that, when I am personally talking to the students that I keep, hearing from them. So here are some things, and please feel free to, chime in. Typically, I actually ask people about what are they looking for when they're moving from, say, healthcare to data analytics, or they coming from, say, help desk to cybersecurity. What are they looking for? They're looking for better salary, right? And they're looking for job security, opportunities for growth and development. They want to also make an impact and also be part of the cybersecurity threats that they keep that's abound us everywhere. They definitely want to remote jobs, flexible working days so that, they can spend time with family. And lastly, of course, I think I mentioned about the impact. Some of the challenges that I hear from students is that they lack the technical skills and education, and not everyone's able to go into a 4-year technical degree, right? I mean, they need time as well as they're very, very expensive. And you've all heard it that, companies have actually come out and said that, we're looking for skills and not necessarily, college education. Some of the things that we definitely hear is the bias and discrimination. Some of the women, definitely complain about this a little bit more. Or certain minorities definitely talk about, the discrimination or the bias that exists. And lack of professional networks. You know, I always tell the story that, when I came to this country over 30 years ago, I was actually lucky enough to have a network of friends and family who were in tech. So they kind of propelled me and they mentored me as to, okay, you need to go into computer science. And that's how I was able to get into this field. But, I worked in the tech industry for almost 10 years, but took a break for my kids. And I actually, homeschooled them and, did some things. And after about 10 years, I had the degree, I had a master's in computer science. I had work experience almost close to 10 years. But when I was trying to go get back into the tech industry, it was extremely intimidating. Things had changed. It was overwhelming. It was very hard. So that got me thinking that, hey, if it is hard for me as a person who's actually studied here and worked here with the experience, and how hard it must be for people who are transitioning from a different industry, or people who are coming to this country looking for a better life and opportunity. So that really, got me thinking about, I want to focus on people who actually struggle to enter the tech workforce. And that's how we started Skillspire. So not everyone has that professional network, which is really, really important. um, Financial constraints, like I mentioned to you before, 4-year degrees cost a lot of money. Not everyone's able to do that. Cultural barriers, people who come from different, cultures definitely find it very difficult to, acclimatize themselves to the US culture and the way things are done. And last not the least, imposter syndrome. And this is not just for people who are starting new, but even for people who have been in the industry for a long time. If you talk to any uh, you know any engineer who's been in the industry for maybe 2 to 3 years, they say it's very real. Even with the experience, they do find it, it's like, hey, am I able to do this, or this is looks hard to me, or that imposter syndrome is very, very real. So, our mission at Skillspire is to break down these barriers that preclude women, people of color, other underrepresented communities, and anyone in general who are struggling to enter the tech workforce. That community that you're looking for network, for mentorship, we want to be that community for you. And that's one of the reasons that we've been doing these workshops. I think we've done several of these workshops now, that if you feel like, hey, I need some support, I need someone to kind of maybe mentor me as to, what would be a good fit for me, given my background. Because a lot of people, and most of you here, do bring transferable skills from different industries. And those years, definitely, that experience that you have is valuable. Whether you come from healthcare or finance or aviation or whatever industry, there is some domain expertise that you bring to the table. And how can we transfer those skills into, into a pathway where you would be challenged as well as satisfied? Our difference, there are plenty of boot camps out there. Some of the differences that I can say, we have kept it very flexible in the evenings and weekends. It's about 18 hours per week of commitment that we ask from you, and they're all in the weekend. And all of our courses are about 12 to 20 weeks long. It's all live instruction. They're not recorded. Well, they're recorded after the live instruction so that you can come back and watch it again. But it's live instruction with the instructors, just like how you saw with SK. And we also have a teaching assistant who's live and present if you run into any difficulties. All of the instructors work in the industry. That's one of our biggest. When I'm looking for an instructor to hire, I look for people who come with empathy, who can understand the people, who can understand the diversity of the people that they're teaching, and also understand the industry trends and pathways. We do provide career support services. We have a coach and a recruiter who um, who has several years of support in the recruiting industry, and she will come in halfway through the course, mentor you with your resume, your LinkedIn, your just generally coaching you. And we are constantly working with companies, almost, I think, specifically in Seattle, but not just limited to Seattle, but then we do have some partnerships that we continuously work on. So if there are openings or apprenticeships or internships that come up, we will definitely place that and send them over to you. Guaranteed internship is not available for cybersecurity, at least not yet, but we do provide that for software engineering software engineering students. So we do have a partnership with a company in Seattle where all of our software engineering, like full stack web development or Java and cloud computing or C Sharp and Azure cloud students actually go into that internship. And it is remote, it is unpaid, but you do get that real world experience. We've also kept for our fees affordable. um, the range is anywhere from 4,500 to 6,500. And if you look at our curriculum and the things that we offer, it's probably half or even half the price of other coding boot camps. And a lot of people, students have asked me before, how is it that you're able to do this? We're not a huge company. We are, you know, quote unquote, a boutique coding boot camp. We don't have huge rental places or marketing engine. So we're able to provide that discount to you. And lastly, but not the least, we do have a Discord community and we do provide you with lots and lots of resources. Our instructors themselves become your mentor and they're able to help you through, a lot of questions regarding the industry and how do you get past the interview phases and things like that. Any questions? I know I'm kind of going a little fast here, but definitely stop or post, on the chat, if you have any questions. Just to give you an overview of all the courses that we offer, we have full stack web development. We do two stacks. One is the MERN stack, JavaScript with React, which is actually starting next week on May 3rd, if anyone's interested. We do have a Python stack with Flask and Django. In data analytics, we do two courses. It's a two-part course, and there's an introductory course. We start off with advanced Excel, getting into a lot of SQL programming, Microsoft Power BI, and Python, and then getting into more of the advanced topics in data science, where you're learning more of the NumPy, Pandas, and Python, machine learning, statistical analysis, and things like that. There are two software and backend software engineering courses that we also teach, and they are the Java and cloud computing with AWS and C Sharp with Azure Cloud. The Java and cloud computing is the Spring Boot framework with microservices, which is, again, very popular. Last but not the least, cybersecurity, where I think SK can give you a lot more detail, getting into the foundational stuff, getting into a little bit of Python scripting, and offensive and defensive security. So these are our offerings at this time. We are working on bringing portfolio projects as well. We've heard, and this has been an ask from the students that, they finish boot camps and they need to keep working on projects for real world experience. So we're trying to bring in, and this is probably in June, that we would be offering portfolio projects. And these are 1 month intensive 20 hours per week projects that's going to mimic the real world company. Say, for instance, how do you go through the analysis, the requirements, the implementation and testing? So you'll have a lead, I would say a project lead or a technical lead who would kind of manage a team of students. So be on the lookout for that. Lastly, this is my if you need to talk to me about any information that you need, my email is here. It's on the website. That's my direct phone number if you want to reach me. And I'll post my meeting link as well as my phone number and email on the meeting link. And that's all I have for you guys. Any questions? Now, I cannot see everyone, so let me, it's odd talking to a blank screen, right, Shvetang? I wish people would just, come online. I mean, this is the closest that we can have to, have a conversation. So I'd love to hear if you have any questions. How many people are interested in a coding bootcamp? I mean, I think SK will, he's a great instructor. He's been teaching for a long time. And if you've been enjoying this thing, you're going to learn a lot. a lot in the boot camp that's coming up. Any questions? Can you show the slides again? Yes, I can. Was there a particular slide that you were looking for, Carl? I believe it's Carl. Is this a slide? Shweta, unmute and talk to me. Is this a slide that you were looking for? You know, I'm not able to see the chart, so Aldrich, if you're there, maybe you can tell me.
We can see your slide, Yasmin.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
I think Carl was asking
Ah,
was asking about a slide. Not sure which one he was talking about.
I think he wasn't able to see the slides. He just
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions? Or you have a very quiet crowd here. Have they been talking
Yeah.
to you?
Through the chat. I've been monitoring the chat.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I know it's I'm actually traveling and I'm in Texas, you know. But oh, he's saying I didn't see anything, only your face. Were you able to see my presentation?
I was able to see it, yes.
Yes. Okay. So someone's asking me about payment options. Yes, we do have payment options and we do work on a sliding scale. So don't let financials stop you from moving forward. That's exactly what I tell people, that do not, because, and this is another thing that people come, they want to do it, and then life throws a curveball at them. It's like, oh, this comes, that comes, and they put it away, never come back. They never come back. I mean, once that, you got to kind of seize when you're really interested and just dive in. And if it's financial, please don't let that stop you from moving forward. We can definitely work with you, depending on your situation, and help you out. Any other questions? I leave my email here. Yeah, we can send it to you. And my phone number. Okay, great. Well, this is an awfully quiet crowd of people. Um, Looks like they want to get back into their, doing the work that they're doing. Thank you very much. Thank you, SK, for the wonderful presentation.
All right. Thank you, Yasmin. All right. So let's get back into creating our own Hacklab environment, right? So last where we left off, we were basically taking a look at, how to install VirtualBox. Then we did Ubuntu. Then we installed Docker within Ubuntu. And now comes the part where we're done with that, basic setup. And now we can go ahead and set up our own vulnerable machine, so to speak, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And that's our VirtualBox right there. Next, what we'll go ahead and do is create our Kali VM, right? We need to finish setting up our Kali VM. Now, why do we need our Kali VM? And what is this Kali VM that I'm talking about, right? Have you guys heard about Kali? I know somebody mentioned Kali earlier in the chat, but I was just waiting till this time. Kind of, yes. What do you guys think is the Kali VM? If you can give me, some words about it, just some description. Used for hacking? Yes, sure, right? What we call it is a flavor of Linux that is used specifically for hacking, right? It's a system that has been created for a specific purpose, right? Ethical hacking, right? Simulate environment for malware. There's actually a different one for that. And it won't be a GUI. Well, for Kali, yes, it's going to be a GUI install, right? We're not doing just command line for Kali, but we are going to be using some of the command line. All right. But Kali, as I said, a tool set or a system that has been created specifically for hacking, right? Or a, I would say flavor of Linux. It's really useful. Many of the tools out there that have been spread out, right? GitHub has a lot of different hacking tools. Microsoft themselves have a bunch of different tools. Many other companies have different tools. So Kali was created as a, as a machine that had all of these different tools that were scattered out, right? People didn't have to go hunting. Where can I find this tool? They have this one VM that has everything, right? It is a it is something that is used offensively, all right? Not something that I would recommend using for defensive purposes. The reason being there are other VMs, other OSs that are better for that purpose, right? Kali is better for offensive techniques or red teaming, as we say, right? So where do we get this Kali system, right? I had posted the download link earlier. So let's go to that link. And you can see that here we are, right? If we go to the main website, this is the main website, right? Kali VM. It is maintained by a company called Offensive Security um, that do specific courses for certification for just this Kali OS that are that are really advanced. I would say as a new user, I would say you would first have to have a basic understanding of cybersecurity, then you can go for those certs, right? Those are something that do require some experience, right? So here you have the Kali VM, you have great documentation, you have documentation on all the different tools. If you are worried about, a specific tool or how it can be used, go to the Kali tools documentation. You can search for a tool in here. For example, let's search for something called Nmap, right? Nmap or network mapper is one of the most basic tools that are part of any hacker's, tool set, whether ethical or unethical. They are going to use Nmap first, right? Nmap or network mapper helps you identify vulnerabilities, open ports on a system. So here, if I take a look at Nmap, you can see that it gives me everything that I would need to learn about this tool and to learn how to use it, right? Nmap here has great examples. They have, great ways of showcasing different related tools to Nmap, right? So great VM. That's what we're going to use for our hack lab, right? This is going to be our attacking machine, right? This is going to be our testing machine that we use. All right, so let's go back to the downloads page. And here we mentioned that we wanted to get the virtual machine image, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're just running it as a virtual machine. And then go to VirtualBox 64. And once you click on it, it's going to start the download for the Kali VM, right? Now, once it is downloaded, it is going to look like this, right? That 7-zip file right there. Right, so to extract it, just open it with the 7-zip tool. If you're unsure, if you don't have the 7-zip tool, it's a free tool that can be downloaded online. All you have to do is search for 7-zip. That's it right there. It's a very small tool, and it's really useful. If you are somebody that uses WinRAR, or if you are somebody that uses any other tool for extracting RAR files or zip files, just move over to 7-zip. It's a lot better, a lot cleaner, a nicer tool overall. All right, you can just click download from here. Make sure to get the 64-bit version or whatever version your system is. Right. For this class, I did put in the requirement to be 64-bit. So, if you have the 64-bit machine, make sure to download that one. You can download it, run it. It's a basic install. All right. So we'll go ahead and extract this. So you can see once 7-zip is installed, you will get a, quick pop-up here for 7-zip. Right. I'm using Windows 11. All right. But if you're using Windows 10, it looks similar. Okay, so you can right click with 7-zip open, and this is the window that's going to pop up. Just hit extract and pick the location where you want to extract it. I'm going to extract it to this folder right here, workshop files. All right, just hit OK, and there we go. It's starting the extraction. Any questions? Anybody have any questions so far? No questions? All right. Okay, so now that we have our Kali folder, when you open it, you'll see that there are two files in here. All right, one of them is the virtual machine image itself, and then the other one is the virtual machine file, right? If we go back to that location where we have VirtualBox installed, and where we get our machines from, we go to VirtualBox VMs. This is our vulnerable machine right here. All right, it's that same machine that we've been working with so far, right? Vulnerable. When you open it, you see that there's a couple of files, right? We have our snapshots right here. We have a bunch of logs, and we have these two files, right? So when we create our vulnerable machine, it creates this VirtualBox machine definition file, right? And then once we add the hard drive, it creates this virtual disk image, right? Now, VirtualBox has a way of importing machines as well. So instead of just having it be created in VirtualBox, we can import it. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to go back to this location, right, where our VMs are, and I'm going to create a new folder here called Kali. All right, and within this folder, I'm going to place those two virtual machine files. All right, so if we go to the desktop, my files, we have these two here. I'm going to copy them. And then go back to that other location to my user, VirtualBox VMs, and then Kali, and then paste them right here. And let's see what happens when we double click this file. All right, not the image, the VirtualBox machine file, right? The VirtualBox machine definition file. All right, let's just double click it and let's see what happens. Look at that. When I double clicked it, it loaded the machine automatically in VirtualBox. I didn't have to configure anything, right? It imported the machine, linked it to the virtual disk image, and it's good to go. I can boot it up right now if I wanted to. But it's not recommended. The reason being, yes, it's here, but we still want to make sure that the right hardware resources have been assigned to that machine. It's not just, it's not just going to pull 16 gigs of RAM at once, right? We need to make sure of that. So let's go under settings, right? So make sure this machine is selected. Go under settings and then go to system. This is where you will see the hardware requirements that have been assigned to it, right? So here you can see the memory is 2048. Out of the box, it's been configured for just 2 gigs of RAM, which is great. We don't want any more than that. We don't need any more than that as such for this, Hacklab environment, right? Next, what we'll do is go to processor, and you can see by default, it picked up 2 processors. That's recommended for Kali, right? You should give at least 2 processors for Kali. One, your Kali system is going to struggle a lot, right? We can leave everything else default in here. We don't need to change anything else, right? So just the motherboard, set it to, 2048, memory, and processor, set it to 2. That's the only thing that we're changing under system, all right? Next, we need to assign it that same network that our vulnerable machine is in, right? So we'll go to network. Make sure that all the others are unchecked, right? So adapter 2 unchecked, 3 unchecked, and 4 unchecked. It's only going to have 1. Okay? It's attached to the NAT network, right? So click on there and you'll get this drop down, move to the NAT network, and it's our Hacklab network, right? Just that same thing that we did earlier with our vulnerable machine. All right, now we can hit OK, and that's it. Our Kali system has been configured. Now we can boot it up. Now we know that it's not going to boot up with, excess amount of resources. It's going to boot up with the right amount. It's not going to make our system struggle, right? So let's go ahead and boot. It's booting up. You can see it also uses grub, and it's asking us, how do you want to boot it? Normal or advanced. By default, we just want it to be normal. Okay. So it's just booting up into its basic default way. We don't want to change anything. That's what we want, right? Okay, Justin saying quick outline after the Kali download. So yeah, Justin, so extract it. So extract the downloaded files, these 2 files. Okay, go to the VirtualBox VMs folder. That's usually under the C drive, under your user, right? So users under your user, and then VirtualBox VMs. And create a new folder here called Kali, and then move those 2 files, the extracted 2 files, into this folder. And double click the virtual machine definition file. It's going to be that blue icon there. Only after moving it though. Don't click it before. Okay. Then the only thing that we did after it loaded into VirtualBox is we added 2 gigs of RAM and made sure that it was 2 processors. added it to this network, and then booted it up. All right, so that's where we are now. All right, so now let's go ahead and log in. To log in to Kali, if you're not able to open it, it's probably because you don't have 7-zip. All right, so just install 7-zip if you don't have that. The Kali download is 2.7 gigs. Yes, you're right. All right, so let's go ahead and log in. How do we log in? The username and password for the Kali system is just Kali and Kali. Then click login. It should work, Turn. I'm not sure why it wouldn't let you unzip it. It should be, it should work. Maybe it's still downloading. Maybe it's not done yet. Okay, so we have our Kali system here. What I'm going to do is again change it to that scale mode so you guys can see it better. Okay. It gives you a brief overview of your usage. It tells you what percentage of resources you're using right now. But that's not what we're going for right now. We're just, taking a look at what this system has. So this system has, all these different tools, right? Tools for recon, right? Information gathering, tools for vulnerability analysis. Again, that's also recon. Web application analysis, right? All these different ways that you can analyze things, right? So it's a great, great, tool set that has been made into this one VM. Another VM that is pretty similar to this one, used for defensive purposes, Flare VM, right? Or the SANS SIFT, right? Those are great VMs also, right? So we have our Kali VM set. It's in the same network. Let's confirm if it's in the same network or not, right? So how do we confirm that? We put in the command IPA, right? Or for short, right? IP address. It tells you the different interfaces on this system and the different IP addresses that have been assigned to, right? So right now we have 10.0.2.4 as the IP that has been assigned to it, and that's the interface. All right, ETH0 is the interface name. How did I get to this page? I just hit this terminal button right here. Right? This is terminal. Terminal is kind of like interacting with the command line, right? So in Ubuntu, this is what we interact with. In Kali, because we have a GUI installed on top of it, we interact with terminal, which in turn interacts with the backend automatically. We don't have to interact with this stuff, right? Okay. So they are in since they both are in the same network, we should be able to talk to each other, right? We should be able to talk the Kali with the vulnerable machine, or the vulnerable machine with the Kali machine, right? Since I know the IP address of the Kali machine, I'm going to go to the vulnerable machine and ping the Kali machine. Right, so let's go ahead and move it to scaled mode. There we go. All right, so I'll do a quick ping command. Ping 10.0.2.4. Right, that's our Kali. And you can see we have replies. That means it's great, right? It's working good. If you're wondering how to stop this, a quick Control C is going to stop that. All right, otherwise it's just going to keep going. right? So now we have confirmed that our Kali machine is set up, it's on the network, and that it can talk to our, our vulnerable machine, right? And vice versa, right? The vulnerable machine is on that same network as the Kali machine and can talk to that machine, right? Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay. All right. So we have imported the Kali machine. We have it set up. Next is our final piece, right? Which is now getting our hack lab to work, right? Now accessing our vulnerable machines that we're going to set up with the Kali machine, right? We have a question in the chat that says, what if they don't ping? If they don't ping, that basically means that they're not in the right network with each other, right? If they don't ping, that means something is causing them not to talk with each other. Most likely it's because they're not in the same network, right? If they are in the same network and you have verified that, then it's possible that the system, especially Kali, did not make the change. That is, it did not request a new IP address from the HCP, right? At that point, then you would need a restart. I would say restart your Kali machine. At that point, it will basically request a new IP address, and then you can test that ping again. You're just doing some troubleshooting there, basically, right? But after verifying the fact that you have your, you have both those machines in the same network, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and set up our Docker containers. Now, how do I know which Docker container I want to use, right? What's a good vulnerable Docker container that you can use, right? So Docker has a way that you can search it via your system. Once you have installed Docker and it's working, there's a way that you can test, or not just test, just search for your specific VM that you're looking for. All right. So what I'm going to do is run a quick search. So let's first test and see if the Docker command is going to work without sudo or not. All right. So I'll just type in Docker ps. And you can see it worked. No, Docker containers are not vulnerable by default. These are specific containers that we're downloading that are going to be vulnerable. They're not vulnerable by default. All right, so Docker ps is a command that tells us all the different containers that are running right now. As you can see, there are none that are running, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to search Docker for a container called bwap, right? bwap, right? Or short for broken web app, right? So let's hit enter. And you can see we have all of these different containers that are available, right? I want you guys to take a look at the one at the top that says Racine/bwap, right? I'm going to type it into the chat there. Racine/bwap. You can see that it has 46 stars, and it's an instance of the OWASP bwap project, right? Now, what is the OWASP bwap project? What is OWASP? What is, all this that we are talking about? Let's do a quick search online, right? What is OWASP, or what's their website, or what do they do? OWASP is a foundation for web security, right? Ensuring that everybody gets more secure. It's an open foundation that has been set up specifically for web application security, but they have branched out to IoT devices, to like different things like Docker as well. They come out with lists every year about the different top 10 vulnerabilities for each of those different kinds of software, right? So if you have OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities, so let's search for OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. And you can see it takes us to this list right here that gives you the top 10 web application security risks and how to mitigate them as well, right? Their last list was released in 2017 and then in 2021, right? They do keep updating every couple years or so, right? Now we will be taking a look at a couple of these vulnerabilities, right? Once we get our Hacklab going. But that's what the OWASP Foundation is, right? Now to ensure that everybody conforms to good security, they also came up with ways to show people what bad security means and how it can be exploited, right? That's what that Docker container is. That's what that Racine Docker container is. It's basically a set of 100 vulnerabilities in one, right? Open web app container. The 2013 list. I think I got disconnected there. Can you guys hear me okay now? Okay, all right. Yeah, so as I was saying, like the broken web app is something that basically conforms to the old list, but it's a really good place to start. Even if it's it's old, those vulnerabilities still apply. They still apply even today, right? So it's a really nice place to start, right? So that's what the OWASP foundation is, and that's what the Racine BWAP project is. All right, and we can get more information about it if you just search for that container. So I'm just typing in Racine BWAP here. Just gonna search, and that's the Docker link to it. I'm gonna send that out as well in the chat. And it basically tells you that it's based on the BWAP project and how to run the container, right? So all you have to do is go to the site, run this or copy this command, right? Or keep track of it, and then go back to our vulnerable machine and run that command, right? Docker run -d -p 8080 Racine BWAP and hit enter. There we go. You can see that it went to Docker's central repository and is downloading all the different required dependencies and different things that it needs to build the actual container. All right. And that's it. The container is running. How can I check? Well, Docker PS. You can see right here, when I type in Docker PS, it shows that I have a container running that's called Racine BWAP, and it's forwarding port 80 to port 80. right? Now, what does that mean? It basically means if I open up my web browser in Kali, since Kali is on that same network, I've opened up Firefox, and you can see I can browse the internet and everything, right? You can do Google searches, everything, right? It's connected to the internet, but that's fine, right? We can go to the IP address of our vulnerable machine, right? Now, what's the IP address of the vulnerable machine? How do I find that out? Can anyone tell me? If I'm on this Linux machine, the Ubuntu machine, how do I find its IP address? Ah, we have some people that are familiar with Linux, right? ifconfig. Right, you're right. ifconfig can be used to find the IP address. We can also use IPA, right? That's the default, command that's in all Linux machines, right? Everything has that command there. So if I type in IPA, it gives me the IP address, right? Now, which one of these IP addresses am I going to use, though? I'm going to use the IP address of the second interface, right? The first interface is a loopback interface, right? Loopback means it's just internal to that host, right? It's just an interface that has been set up for that host itself. It's not connecting to anything, and nothing is going to connect to it, right? It's just a loopback interface that identifies the machine. Then you have the second interface, which is ENP0S3. I'm unable to mark it on the screen. I'm not sure why annotations are not working, but because I'm unable to mark it, I cannot show you where on the screen it is, but it's right next to the 2, if you guys can see that, if you guys can identify that, right? Right next to the 2:ENP0S3. That's the name of the interface, right? That's the interface that I'm going to go for. You have two other interfaces, the Docker 0 and a VETH32F35, whatever, just some random port, right? What are those interfaces? Docker containers, to isolate their traffic, they do assign interface to each containers, right? So that Docker 0 interface that you see, that's for running Docker itself and how it identifies the container against the machine. So each Docker container gets its own IP address. All right. But that's not the IP address that I'm going to use. Nor am I going to use the IP address for that fifth interface, or how it's labeled with 5, but it's the fourth interface, the VETH. That's just a temporary interface that has been created again for Docker purposes, right? So not those two. We're going to use ENP0S3. All right. So the IP address for that is 10.02.15. So let's see what happens when I go back to the Kali machine and go to that IP address, 10.02.15. It says unknown database, BWAP. That's okay. That's fine. That's because we are on the setup page for BWAP, right? Once we get here, we do have to run a setup for BWAP to work. Okay, for BWAP to work right? But this basically shows us that we have connected to that machine, right? Now, this is something that I was able to do because I already had access to that vulnerable machine, right? Where is my Ubuntu? Because I had access to this vulnerable machine. But what if we wanted to simulate an actual environment where I'm not going to have access to this machine, right? In a true Hacklab environment, we're not going to have access to this machine. We want to be able to figure out if there is a machine on the network. So how do we do that? Well, Kali has a way of doing that, right? We can just go open command prompt and type in a command called net discover. Now it says you must be root to run this, right? How do we run root commands in Linux? We have been running it since the beginning of the workshop, right? Or at least since we installed Ubuntu. Sudo, you guys are right? Sudo. So sudo net discover. It's going to ask the password for Kali, which is just Kali. And you can see it's running a scan across my network trying to identify IP addresses. But as you guys can see, is it running it in the right network? Is it the right network? No, right? Because we are in a 10.0 network. And this one is running a scan across 192.168. So it's not going to find anything. It's completely different. We have to give it the right network. It does that by default. Like NetDiscover just automatically hunts 192.168 because that's the most common address out there, right? So we'll just do -R to specify a range and let it know that we are scanning across 10.0.0 network. So now it's running a scan across 10.0.0. But that wasn't right either, right? I missed a specific piece of information, which is the 2. Now it knows the exact network that we're in, and it found my machines, right? Now it found 4 machines, right? It found 4 machines. What are these 4 machines? Well, I know that the 192.168 or the 10.0.24 is my Kali, right? If you do an IPA, 10.0.24 is the Kali. So none of these is the Kali machine. I know this is my the Ubuntu machine. So what are these right here? Right. Well, your host machine does get an IP address assigned as well from the network. So, one of these is that. And then you have an internal gateway and switch by VMware, or sorry, by VirtualBox that is running in the background, which is basically those 2 IPs. Right? So that's where it's coming from. But now we know that we have 2 machines that we can work with, right? These 2, we don't really care about, right? But these 2, yes, we do, because these could be potential targets, right? This is how we are basically creating our hack lab, guys. Do you guys see how it all, basically fits together, how it all comes together into a hack lab? Everyone's getting that part? Let me know if you have any questions. Okay. So now we can do more things, right? What are some commands that we can run on these machines that we have set up? Well, I showed you guys net discover, which is basically allowing you to find different machines on the network. What do we do next? Well, we can do a quick nmap, right? I'm going to do a sudo nmap, right? Then the network mapper for recon. Anybody that is in ethical hacking, unethical hacking, they would do this first, right? So sudo nmap -ss -sc -sv. These are specific flags that I'm typing in, right? Now, what are these flags? How do they work? What's the importance behind them that requires a class itself, right? Nmap itself requires a class. So if you guys want to learn more about it, definitely join that class, right? That Ulrich just posted. All right, so sudo nmap -ss -sc sv, and then we give it the IP address. So 10.0.2.15. So you can see it's starting a scan, and it's going to try and run that scan against that system, and it did. And look at that. What is the information that we collected? We collected things like, is the system up or not? Yes, it is. What are the ports that are open? You have port 22 that's open. You have port 80 that is open, right? On port 80, you have different locations that you can go to. So port 80 basically means something that you can access via your web browser. All right, so if you're right here, right, we're right here. This is basically going to port 80 on that machine. All right, so nmap represents that. The screen is very small for me, so it's not showing me everything that I want to see here. There we go. That's what I was looking for. All right. And it shows different locations that I can go to, right, on that same machine, right, on port 80. It says that there's a /admin location. So let's go there, right? All I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and instead of putting login.php, I'll just move to /admin. And there we go. That's the BWAP that we had deployed, right? But it went to the, /admin location. But we can go to other locations as well, right? How about we test a vulnerability, right? Would you guys like that? Do you guys want to test a quick vulnerability in VWAP? Yeah. Have you guys heard of any vulnerabilities? If anybody can, give me some vulnerabilities in the chat for web applications. If anybody knows it, you don't have to. CSRF, SQL injections. That's great. Yep. Great vulnerabilities. CSRF, or what CSRF stands for? Cross-site request forgery. Yeah, great. That's awesome. Yep, those are certain vulnerabilities as, called by OWASP. Both of these are in the top 10 list. You also have one called cross-site scripting, right? So let's take a look at cross-site scripting, right? So for BWAP to work right, we have to first initialize it, right? Because if I just go to the standard location, it says unknown database, the connection failed, right? So to initialize it, we're just going to change this login.php to install.php, right? And that's going to take us to the installation page. And all we have to do is click here to install. And then you can see it says installation successful. That's it. That's the only thing you have to do to initialize it, right? Heartbleed, or yeah, Heartbleed vulnerability. You're right. All right, so the installation is successful. We can go ahead and log in. Right, if you go to the login page, you can enter login credentials right here to log in. There's a reason why you have to log in. It's to set the security level for different vulnerabilities. As you get better with testing vulnerabilities, you can go from low to medium to high. It's going to basically require more effort, more recon, knowing more information before you'll be able to break the web app, right? Before you'll be able to hack the web app. I'm going to stick to low for now, right? Just to show you guys how this can be useful, right? So we can go to low and log in. You don't have to save the username and password. And there we go. We're logged into the portal. Now we can pick which bug do you want to hack, right? So let's go ahead and pick a bug that we want to hack. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you guys cross-site scripting. So let's go ahead and pick cross-site scripting. It's a vulnerability that allows you to basically run arbitrary JavaScript, right? What it allows you to do is manipulate how the page is being displayed on the client side of things, right? A website, a web app is a transaction between a client and a server, right? So with cross-site scripting, you can modify or hack the client side of things, right? And collect interesting information like their cookies, right? Cookies identify you to the website or the web app, right? Whenever you log into Amazon or Netflix or some of these services, how do they know? Like every time you go to their page, it says hi, your name, and they already know that it's you that's logging in. How do they know that? It's because they save a small cookie on your system that identifies you uniquely, right, to that web app. So if you go to that site and that site recognizes that cookie, then it knows that it's you, right? That's how it knows that you have logged in. All right. So cross-site scripting can help you get that cookie. And if you have that cookie, you can impersonate somebody else, right? That's what the cross-site request forgery is. So cross-site scripting can lead to cross-site request forgery, right? Now, what these vulnerabilities are in depth, right? There are different kinds. There's get, post, reflected, stored, different kinds of vulnerabilities that you can, take advantage of. And what these are, how they work, that's another day, right? Maybe another workshop, we'll see. So cross-site scripting, reflected get, we'll go ahead and click hack. And now we're on the page where we can hack this particular part of the web app. We can break it, right? Any ideas on how we can break this? Anybody have any suggestions, right? How we can break this? What kind of output are we looking for here? You know how sometimes you go to a web page and it gets you that annoying pop-up, like call this number, or your system's gonna go bad, or it just keeps popping up again and again, right? Kind of like a dialog box in Chrome, right? So how about we try to simulate something similar, right? Where by just going to this form, we are going to have it generate a dialog box pop-up of sorts, right? So what we'll do is first we'll test this page, right? Before we can start attacking a page, we need to know how it works, right? Only then we can successfully break it or, attack it. So what we're going to do is just going to test it. I'm just going to put, first name, last name, and then hit go. Let's see what it does, right? So what this site is doing is that it's taking the first name, last name that was entered, and then applying it to certain parameters, submitting a form, and then displaying that, right? That's what this web application is doing, this XSS underscore get.php web app. right? So what we're going to do is we are going to manipulate this form so that instead of just displaying the name, it creates a small pop-up box, right? So how do we actually get around to do that? Well, what we need to do is we need to test and see if this box is going to accept JavaScript, right? How do we test that? We basically give it the script tag, right? That's the JavaScript tag, and put something, simple in there. Maybe something like an alert, right? That's going to create that dialog box. We can even just do like a script / script just to see if it's going to accept it or not. And I'll just put test in here and hit go. So it looks like it did accept it, right? It accepted the first name, it ran the script, but did not display anything. It's because it just ran it. It's just an empty script. It didn't really do anything, right? And next, it displayed the last name. So now we know that it is accepting JavaScript. So then how can we manipulate that? Well, I'm going to ask it to create an alert box for me. So the Docker container is what's running the web app, right? So let's see what happens if I go to the Docker container and I stop it, right? So you guys are probably wondering, how does it relate? Because why did we go through all that to set that up, right? It's because if we stop it, right? So let's do Docker stop. And we can give it the container ID or the name. No, it's not something that is running on our Kali machine. It is running on our vulnerable machine, right? We are just connecting from the Kali machine to the vulnerable machine. Our vulnerable machine is what's hosting that BWAP instance. And then we can attack that BWAP instance with our Kali machine. That's why we needed that Docker machine to be set up, right? Let's see, I'm going to change the not letting stop that machine. If nothing else, we can just reboot the machine and it'll stop it. Let's try the container ID instead. I usually don't try to use that because it's too long, right? Okay, it's running right now to stop that machine, and there we go, it has stopped it. So if I run the docker ps command, you can see no more containers. So if we go back to our Kali machine, and if I hit refresh, unable to connect, right? It's not going to work. So let's go ahead and start our container again. Now, the container does not save anything, all right? Keep that in mind. So if you do stop it, all of the work that you would have done for the container is no longer valid, okay? It's not going to work. You can see it says unknown database. It takes everything out. But it doesn't take that long to set it up again, right? We can just do install.php, click here to install. Exactly, Sue, you're right. VWAP lives in a Docker container on the Ubuntu vulnerable, VM. Right. We'll go ahead and log in, debug, and go back to our cross-site scripting. Right. So we have our reflected attack, do the scripting again, and it works, right? Now let's generate that alert box. Script, right? And how do we generate an alert box? Well, you can look up that information online, right? You can do something like JavaScript or alert box, right? You don't have to know this by heart, right? You just don't have to know this off the top of your head. You can look it up online, right? It's easy. So Google helps us with that a lot. So you can see, to create an alert with JavaScript, all you have to do is type in alert and whatever message you want inside of parentheses and the double quotes there, right? So let's copy that. Go back here, paste it right here, and run. It didn't work because I need to enter both fields. So let's enter both fields. Test. Go. There we go. Hello, I'm an alert box. So that's basically cross-site scripting. Right? Now, this is a reflected one. Why is it called reflected? It's because the attack is in the URL itself here. So you see that? The attack is right here. So if I send this link to somebody, right? Maybe I'm hosting this website and my website has this vulnerability. And I send a link with that kind of an attack in there, I can have this alert box get the cookie from my site, right? And that would basically give me the information that uniquely identifies that user. Right? So that's cross-site scripting. Anybody have any questions? It's just a basic overview of cross-site scripting and what the reflected cross-site scripting attack is. Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay. How about we do one more? Then we can call it a day. Yeah. Somebody had mentioned SQL injection. So how about we try an SQL injection on VWAP? All right. So again, the process is the same. We pick our bug, right? We can go to bugs here, scroll down, look for SQL injection, right? I think I passed it at the top. Yep, SQL injection, and we can do a simple one. How about this one? Get search, right? SQL injection, get search. So we'll go ahead and click hack. Okay, so this is a web app that uses SQL as its backend, right? It's a database that is basically for movies. So let's do a quick test. Let me put Spider-Man in here. Let's see what happens. If I search Spider-Man, it says no movies were found. What if I just hit search? Okay, so it gives me all the different movies that it has hosted, right? So it's just a list of movies in here. Now, how am I going to attack this? How am I going to hack this? It's basically something that is using SQL as its backend to make the search, right? So when I type in something in here, like for example, iron, then I hit search, it's running a like a simple SQL query in the backend to connect to the server and then request server for results. All right. So keep that in mind. This one is a server affecting vulnerability. Cross-site scripting affects clients. SQL injection affects servers. All right. The place where the database is hosting all the information. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a single quote in there and hit search. Why am I doing that? Is because a single quote breaks SQL, queries. Having just a single quote in there breaks SQL syntax. All right, so you can see right here, as soon as I put that single quote, it said, you have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual, so and so, and it just gives you a specific information that you should use it like this. For example, at line 1, you're having this issue. All right. So how can I break this? What can I do to like break this web application? Well, what I'm going to try and do is a simple SQL injection. This is something that is commonly used, something that tests SQL, on a server, is I'm just going to put a single quote or 1 equals 1, and then everything that comes after this should be a comment. All right. So what this is doing is that it's taking my single quote, and by putting it in here, it's breaking that syntax, right? So it puts my single quote right here, puts my or 1 equals 1 right here before that percentage, and then because of this, hash sign there, when it goes right here before the percentage, everything that comes after that hash sign is commented out. So whatever's the rest of the query, it's going to comment that out. All right, so it's not going to allow the rest of the query to run. But what does that get me? All right, let's hit search. It basically gives me all of the movies, right? Now, I was able to get those movies even by just searching as a blank search, right? But that's the broken web app. It's also giving you all the information by just doing a blank search or by breaking it with SQL. Now, why is this an important example? Because this is just a database of movies. What if it was a database of usernames or passwords or a database of customers, right? You can get a lot of personal information just by running that simple command, right? So even though it's kind of silly in the BWAP, it's showing how can it have a big impact. In fact, Sony, right, had its PlayStation Network attacked with this similar attack, right? And they were able to get the username and passwords for all the different people who had Sony's PlayStation service signed on, right? So they were able to dump the entire database of usernames and passwords for that PlayStation Network. And I believe it was back in 2007, if I'm not wrong. Okay. So those are just some vulnerabilities that you can work with in these Docker containers, right? As you can see, this entire process, we mostly use defaults. Didn't make many configuration changes except for networking, right? And then we created our Docker vulnerable machine that is hosting all these vulnerable containers. Now, BWAP is just one of those containers out there. There's also something called DVWA. All right, DVWA, or as the name sounds, damn vulnerable web application, DVWA. something similar to Broken Web App, but it was created mainly for attacking PHP and MySQL, right? As you can see right here, mainly showing how that can affect, you know, or how big of an impact having those vulnerabilities can be, right? How do I, make Docker container, or how do I host a Docker container for it? Going back to our image, all we have to do is run a search, right? Docker search dbwa. You have all these different ones that are available, right? Now, which one is a good one? Something that has a lot of stars, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do some advanced commands here. You don't have to know this command, but it's useful. I'm just going to do a head command, and that's it. That just gives me the top, results for it. And you can see the first one is the citizens TIG, right? /DVWA. So that's the one that I'm going to stick with because that's the one that has the most stars, right? So the process is simple. The command is exactly the same, except for the port information. The port needs to be changed, right? We cannot host it on the same port. That's okay. We'll just host it on 81, right? Instead of 8080, or, instead of just 81, we can even do 8080. That's the alternate HTTP port. All right, and then change the container, citizens TIG DBWA, and hit enter. That's it. It's going ahead and downloading that container. And there we go. It's set up. All we have to do is run a Docker PS, and we see the other container. Now, how do we access the other application? Well, we changed the port, right? Now, normally, whenever you connect to a website, you don't have to specify the port number. It's because web browsers are automatically configured to go to port 80 or port 443, the two most common ports for websites. Whenever you want to go to an alternate port, you have to let the browser know that, hey, I don't want to go to port 80 or 443. I want to go to port 8080, right? 10.02.15 with a colon in there, and then 8080. Hit enter. Oh, we have to let it know the protocol to use, so HTTP. And it's not working right now is, again, because of not being initialized, right? So let's go ahead and initialize DBWA. Right? So we'll go ahead and run the dbwa command. And if you're always unsure of what the command would be, right? If I wanted to initialize something, you can always search it online, right? You can always search for dbwa setup, for example, right? And that's going to guide you on how to get dbwa working, right? And that's what the application looks like, right? And they give you the entire guide, right, on how to set it up, including the commands and everything, right? So it's a great way to get your lab running. So you can see the place that you have to go to is dbwa and then setup.php. So we're going to the wrong location. So let's go ahead and go to our Kali machine / DVWA, and the capitalization matters. Okay, so casing matters. So it cannot be lowercase or uppercase or different. It has to be exactly how they want it to be. So DVWA / setup.php. If it still does not work, okay. So there are containers that won't work well with each other. So BWAP, DVWA, not going to work well with each other, right? Because the way this container is set up, it wants port 80. If you don't give it port 80, it's not going to work, right? So again, great troubleshooting here to see what kind of problems you might come across when you are working with containers and when you're trying to work around your Hacklab, right? So here, what we can do, we can stop that container and stop both of these containers. So I'm just going to say Docker stop. Oh. And you can see whenever you're confused, you can always search for the help. So Docker stop. So we need the exact container ID. So Docker stop, and we can let it know it's 736. So all right, so that stopped. We can also do another one, Docker stop. And there's an easier way. If you give it a container name, right, there's a name tag that you can apply, then you can shorten the name out and it will give you easier access. All right, let's actually do that. And what we can do is we can check the Docker run help guide to identify how do we give it a name, right? And I'm just going to run some Linux there, and it gives us the ability right here. It says, if you want to give it a name or assign a name, then just use the name string, right? Great. So we'll run the same command right here. Let me stop the other container as well. Docker ps, Docker stop, 336 F7 4232274. All right. So that's going to go ahead and stop that container. Next, we'll create the new DVWA container by giving it that name as well. All right. So give it port 80 because it doesn't like the other port. Sometimes containers are that way where they don't like the other port. That's okay, right? We don't mind that. Yes, there we go. Okay. -- name, and this one we'll just call it BWAP, and I'm going to change the port on this one to 80. All right. And then we'll create the other one, which is BWAP, which is DVWA. So I'm not able to find that other command. So sometimes when you're not able to find the command that you want to use to run the other container, you can just run history and find the other command. So I'm not seeing that. That's okay. we'll just do 17. And that gives me the name of the container, right? So what we'll do is just run that container. So docker run. And I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit too fast here, just that we are pretty close to our end time, and I do want to show you guys everything that I can. So 80, citizens TIG-DVWA. All right, so that's running. Let's go back to our Ubuntu machine, or our Kali machine, sorry, not the Ubuntu machine, Kali machine. And first, I'm just going to go to port 80. And you can see it's working now. So it does like the port 80, right? But did you guys see how easy it was for me to switch between two vulnerable web applications? If we did not have Docker, for example, we would have to completely set up two different virtual machines for DVWA and for BWAP, right? With containers, it gives us the ability to just set up our Hacklab as quickly as we want, right? We can just go ahead and find the vulnerable machine that you're looking for and then just run it, right? One site that I will give you guys before, we call it a day here is you can just search online for Docker vulnerable images, right here. And you'll find this Docker repository here by vulnerables, and it has a whole bunch of different machines, right? Not just DVWA, it has many other. Like for example, if you wanted to test Go, that's also another, OWASP based vulnerable machine. You can get it here. If you wanted to test specific vulnerabilities, right? You have CVEs, or common vulnerabilities and exposures. So these containers target this specific vulnerability, right? So there's a lot of great information out there for continuing this hack lab, right? You guys can do many things with this hack lab, with this just container setup, with this hack lab, right? So as a conclusion, right, we'll just do a quick recap here of what we talked about today, right? We talked about virtualization and how it was useful, what containers are and how containers can be useful, right? What are the benefits and differences between virtualization and containers, right? We also talked about how to install VirtualBox as our, virtualization hypervisor, right? We also, talked about how to install Ubuntu on that software, right? VirtualBox, and then install Docker to host all of our containers, right? Then we used our Kali machine to attack the hosted vulnerable containers, right? Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Sure, yeah. I can show you guys Kali to use the attacking it with Kali. Mainly, I didn't want to dive into too many advanced tools, but since we're being asked here, so one of the great tools that we looked at was Nmap, right? That we used. The next tool that's really great for usage in Kali itself is something called Nikto. Right? Nikto is a web, vulnerability scanner that helps you identify things that may be wrong with your web app, right? So Nikto-H, and then we have to give it the location that we want to test, right? So the IP address, so 10.0 to 15. And you can see it's running a great scan, and it tells you what are things that you can look at that might be interesting, right? So that's also another great tool that can be used with Kali, right? The other thing that you can do is use things like SQL map, right? So if you have SQL map, you can use that to target DVWA, right? Uh, Carl, so are you going to have more classes like these? So I mean, you can request for webinars if you have any specific ideas. You can definitely, reach out and let us know if you wanted to do a specific kind of webinar, or if you wanted to do like a part two of this webinar where I'm using SQL map, or different specific tools like Burp Suite for targeting these web apps, right? And where can I find exercises or assignments to practice on? So that would be all part of the class, Carl. So if you want, you can take the class, and there you will have to do assignments and exercises that can help you practice and hone your skills, right? There's a lot of background information that is required. I can show you guys the tools, but it's not gonna help too much. The reason being, there's a lot of background information that is missing, right? Like for example, why do we use SQL map, or Nictel? It talks about all these different locations. How do I use these locations to my advantage, right? Or if I do a tool like Dirbuster, right, and I give it the location 10.02.15, it's also looking for specific information, right? So why is it looking for this information, right? There's a lot of background that I would have to give before I could, give you guys more information about it. But in the class, I can give you guys that, background information that you're looking for. Stu, does that help? Using Nicto, or using tools like Dirbuster? Yeah. You can try Hack Me as well, Taryn. But again, that's a full, your that's a full self-learning platform. So you would have to learn it all by yourself. You can also try Hack the Box. I mean, there's a lot of good information out there. There's also VulnHub. So if you guys haven't looked at this one, you can definitely check this out. It's called VulnHub. These are vulnerable machines that you can download that have specific vulnerabilities. There are write-ups for each of these machines in here as well, and it's all free, right? It's all available for free, and you can use your current setup that we just did, right, to download machines from here and test them with Kali, right? This setup that we just did will help you, learn hacking. It doesn't matter what machine you're trying to break into. The setup that we just did, it's basically your own hack lab. You can even use that setup to connect to Hack the Box and hack machines on Hack the Box using their, VPN. All right, so this setup can be used to teach yourself hacking, guys. That's what the entire webinar is for, is to show you guys how to create your own hack lab. Any questions? Anybody have any other questions? No questions? Okay. Well, we just had one last slide for you guys, so definitely, scan this. There's a 15-minute career consult, you can do with us if you wanted to. But if there's no other questions, then I'll give you guys a few minutes back of your Saturday. And hope you guys learned a lot. I had fun. It was great explaining everything, and your questions were amazing too. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending. Yeah, no problem. How long before the recording is sent out? So it does get uploaded within the hour or so. So the email should be coming in, maybe if not today, maybe tomorrow or Monday. Right. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, guys, if you're looking to just, get in touch with me. I will send the link right now.